friends, welcome back to another video on this channel, and today I have something really exciting I'm talking about. If you've read the title, you know that I'm talking about my newest published book, Perfect. And I know a lot of you probably are like, wait a second, I read that years ago, how is this a new book? And yes, I have published an earlier version of the same book when I was in high school, and I was a lot less experienced, had a lot of grammar and otherwise kind of errors in there. And with the whole new series coming up, I wanted it all to be one polished, smooth series that I wasn't ashamed of as a current writer. So I rewrote Perfect, totally started from scratch, same plot and everything, but I did write every single word over again. So it is a new book. So yes, Perfect just came out this Saturday, and I just wanted to talk about some questions and some interesting facts that I've had a lot of readers ask me about, because I tell everyone when they read Perfect that this book is based on my story and how I grew up, and it follows a lot of the things I went through. And so a lot of people are like, okay, so what does that mean? Like, how far does it follow you? Like, how closely does it follow your story? And how much of it is like fictional? So I wanted to dispel some of those questions and kind of talk about where I got the inspiration from for all the events that happened in Perfect. So I'm excited. I hope you enjoy this. I will warn you, there are some spoilers, so if you haven't read the book yet, I would suggest holding off on this video until then, unless you like knowing what happens at the end, but for me that kind of ruins the fun. So let's get into it. Number one, things that people ask if this is true about me is, were you adopted? And a big part of the story obviously is Gina is adopted, and she doesn't know that for a lot of her life. Growing up, she is kind of shocked when she finds out that her parents didn't tell her about this, and that her real mom is kind of just a homeless person who kind of messed up her life and has no intention of changing it around, and kind of just shows up in her parents' life if she needs money. So that is something that people ask me about. And if you've seen any of my family pictures, you know that there's no question about it. I am my parents' daughter. Everyone who sees me and my siblings thinks that we're twins. We are all very similar. So no, I was not adopted, but when I was writing this story, I really wanted her to feel more like an outsider, like someone who really, really craves love because she feels like she doesn't deserve it. And that was something that I knew probably most adopted kids deal with. Obviously, since I've not been adopted, I can't even begin to understand, but I just felt like that's something that you could add to this plot to drive it forward. And obviously, as an unexperienced teenager that I was when I was writing this book, I didn't really realize the implications of having an adopted person in my book, because they deal with a lot of issues with their birth parents and maybe not even knowing who they are. And so that's something I've really, now writing the second version and the sequel, just knowing that that really influences Gina's life. And that's been really interesting to discover and to delve deeper into that issue that at the time when I came up with the idea I didn't think about. But anyway, all that to say, I wasn't adopted. My feeling of an outsider came more from being a missionary kid, being born and raised in a different country where everyone speaks different language. We're in Europe, so far from our American roots, and that was kind of where I felt like I wasn't an American because I never lived there like long term, and I wasn't Hungarian even though I knew the language, went to the schools and all that, because everyone just knew that we were American and we spoke English at home. And so it kind of was like that weird I don't know where I belong kind of feeling. But in this story, I didn't address that. I didn't want it to be exactly like my life, which is why I kind of brought in the adopted line. Another common question I get is, are the characters in your book based on people that I knew or friends that I had? And the answer is no. I know a lot of people like to read into it and say like, oh wait, I think I'm this person. That is not true, with one exception. Joel's character is based on my ex-boyfriend, and I will kind of talk about this a little later as well. But a lot of their interactions and things he says does come from my ex-boyfriend, and he is really the reason why I wrote this book. Again, I'll get into this a little later, but yeah, so it's hard as a writer to kind of detach yourself from people you know have had great influence on you. And I try really hard, and I know in the second book I'm going to have to talk about this a lot, about how people really do show up in the stories in different ways, but not as a full character. Maybe something they said, a personality trait, but it's a fictional story, so I don't want people speculating like, oh, who's this? So anyway, that kind of answers that question. Another common question I get is that really how you felt with like serving in church and all this other stuff? And the sad truth is that I did struggle a lot with the amount of responsibilities I had at my church at the time, and I did kind of rebel against that. Not as well as Gina. I didn't handle it quite as like low key as she did, but yeah, I really struggled for years. I mean, if you read the book, you'll know, but like years and years of just like bottling up things like, okay, I'm doing it to serve the Lord even though I don't like doing this, and like I'm being the example, trying to do everything right for my parents, for my friends, whatever. And yes, I really struggled with that. And as soon as I like moved out and went to college, I kind of just took a step back, and I was like, not gonna serve, I'm not gonna do anything that I don't want to do, because I kind of needed a break, and I wanted to serve because I wanted to and not because I had to. And I think that's a big difference, because like I say in the book, I think Joel says it the most often, but God doesn't want your work. He doesn't want all your efforts. He wants your heart. And if your heart's not into something, it's not sincere, and it doesn't help. And he's the one who knows why you're doing what you're doing, and he wants you to be full-heartedly serving him and not just doing it because you want to look good. So all that to say, I don't know if I handled it the greatest, but I do remember when I told my parents and opened up to them, they handled it a lot like Gina's parents, where they were like, we did not know that you felt this way, and we never wanted to put this burden on you. And a lot of times we misunderstand, and your biggest critic will be yourself, putting all this expectation on yourself that maybe others don't even have, but it feels like they do. So that was a really cool conversation that I put from my own life into the story itself. And the last thing I want to talk about is the ending, because I have a lot of people who hated the ending. They're like, what did you do? Why did Gina have to move? Why did her life get so great and then it kind of like turned into this horrible thing? And there's two reasons, one a little bit bigger than the other. The first smaller reason is that I don't like just plain old happy endings. I mean, they're nice in their own place, but I just wanted something different. I don't like ending my book the way everyone expects it to end. So wanted it, I want to end on a positive note. I always try to do that, but I didn't want it to be predictable. So that was one reason. And the second reason, the main reason, is that, again, it's based on my story, my life, and that's what happened to me. So I started dating this guy, and it was wonderful, amazing. I was swept away, all this stuff. And then a few months into it, we had to move for college, and I was devastated. I wept for months. I was like depressed, low-key depressed. Asked my family. I was not a fun person to be around when I first moved out. But I mean, that's life. It happens, and I knew it was gonna happen, but I didn't care when we started dating. And yeah, it's sad, but I wanted it to be real because books should be, well, at least contemporary books, not like fantasy, but they should be realistic, and they should show that not every fairy tale romantic thing will end in this beautiful, like, forever love. Unfortunately, that's not the way the world works. And yeah, I was heartbroken. We didn't leave things the way Gina and Joel did. Like, we didn't try to keep up the relationship, so we did talk for a while after I left, but I kind of broke things off like right before I moved because I knew I was going to the States for 4 years for college, and he was gonna stay in Hungary and do college there, and it's hard to commit to a 4-year long distance relationship after you've only been dating for a few months and be able to commit to something like that. So we were like, probably better just to end things now and see how it goes, rather than to drag it out. I know some people say that long distance works for them, and it has. And that was just not the way our story went. But I don't regret it at all, and I again put that conversation into this story where Joel is like, yeah, I know that you're gonna be leaving, but I don't want any regrets. Like, I don't want to regret not knowing who you are and not getting to know you. And so I want to do it even though we might only have a few months together. And that's exactly what the guy told me right before we started dating. And he was right. And honestly, I think back and I don't know where I'd be without him, because he's Joel in the story. He's the one who pushed me to be myself. He's the one who pushed me to talk to my parents and let out my frustration and my just built up like worry that I'm not good enough. And he really changed my worldview on what Christianity really is. And not only that, but he's the reason why I wrote this book. Perfect wouldn't exist if I didn't have a Joel in my life. And I don't talk about him much because obviously I'm married now, happily, and it's kind of weird hashing up old relationships, but I have so much to thank him for, and I know it ended really sadly, and it's hard because, I mean, you know, if you've been through a relationship, like, you've lost something so dear, like that person that you shared everything with, but I am really grateful for it, and I know that God brings people into your life for a reason, and it's not always to stay, and sometimes it's just for that season, and you really need that at that time, and then you kind of move along with your life. And so that is why I ended up having them kind of move away, move apart from each other. And I know a lot of people didn't like that. They wanted a happy ending, but that's not how my life worked out, and that's not how a lot of people's lives work out. So I hope it wasn't too disappointing that you don't want to keep reading, because I don't want to give away a lot, but their whole relationship is not over forever. If you just wait for the next books, you might hear a little bit more about that. That's all I'm gonna say. But anyway, those are some of the big questions I get asked about the story, and I wanted to just shed some light on where this all came from and what my experience was with this whole thing. And I could talk for hours about my perfectionism, how I dealt with it, but I kind of want this to be a shorter video. So if you want to hear more about my story, feel free to ask me and maybe I can do a follow-up. And I hope you really enjoy reading Perfect, or I hope you've already read it because I just gave away everything in the book. But yeah, I hope you've enjoyed it, and I'd love to chat more about it with you guys. So let me know if you have any more questions, and I'll talk to you next time.